Okay, so this foldable is very good about helping us to understand the parts that make up our four excuse me, major biomolecules. So here we have our first biomolecule that's a carbohydrate, the next one lipid, protein, and nucleic acid. These are the four biomolecules that make up all living things. Plants, animals, fungus, whatever you can think of that is alive is made up of these four biomolecules. Bio meaning living, molecule meaning combined chemically. So let's start by looking at the carbohydrate. The carbohydrate has a monomer and a polymer. Remember that mono means one and poly means two or more. So the monomer for the carbohydrate, if we flip this up, looks like this. It is a ring, and we talked about we love carbohydrates. These are our breads and pastas and rice, and so we love carbohydrates. So we wanted to marry it, and we joked in class and said, if you like it, then you're going to put a ring on it. And we actually sang the song, if you like it, then you're going to put a ring on it. And you can see here that the monomer looks like a ring, kind of they're usually some type of hexagon, polygon, something that is a ring shape like this. Remember that they are CHO, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. The name of the monomer for a carbohydrate is monosaccharide. Mono again meaning one, and saccharide meaning sugar. So then we can look under our polymer tab, and we see many of these same carbohydrate rings, but now they're put together. And so this becomes a polysaccharide, more than two or more. So polysaccharide, many sugars. We'll talk about this dehydration and hydrolysis here in a minute. So let's move on to protein just below. The monomer for protein is an amino acid. Now, proteins aren't like the other ones that have a shape that's recognizable. So what we're going to look for on a protein is first CHON, C-H-O-N, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And you can see right here that there's a NH2, the nitrogen contained here. You also see there's this R group here. R group simply means it's a placeholder. A student in class came up with a great analogy. The R group is like the backside of a Lego. It's waiting for something else to fit on right here. In fact, it's waiting for more amino acids to fit on to make a polypeptide chain. And so we see that's definitely a chain, and if you look to identify your elements, C, H, O, and N are very evident there on that polypeptide chain. All right, let's move to nucleic acid. I want to start with that one on this right side. Again, the monomer for the nucleic acid is going to be a nucleotide. Now, there's three parts to a nucleotide. You first have your phosphate group. Remember that nucleic acids are CHONP, CHONP. CHONP, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. And so here I have my phosphate group. I do have a sugar, which is a carbohydrate like we saw up here with our carbohydrates, but that's not all I have, so don't let that sugar confuse you. And then I have my nitrogenous base, which we'll talk more about what that is when we get into DNA and its specific structure. But what we kind of talked about in class is a fun way to look at this, and that is that it's like having, I'm going to put this paper here underneath, if you pretend that the sugar is a house, okay, and the phosphate group is your pool out back, and then your nitrogenous base, which again we'll talk about later, is your neighbors. That's kind of what the shape looks like. Look at that. You've got your house, your pool, and your neighbors out to the side. So that will help you remember that the nucleotide, its basic structure. So for carbohydrate, we remember it's a ring. For polypeptide chain, we don't really have a definite shape. And then for our nucleic acids, we have this house, pool, and neighbor analogy. All right, and then we can look at our polymer. When we put a whole bunch of these together, we're going to get either DNA or RNA. Excuse me, I need to move that over. And I have here, you can kind of see, here's the separate different ones stuck together. But remember that DNA is going to be that double helix shape that you've heard about in the past. And again, we're going to go over this more in depth at a later unit. But that's DNA, and RNA is a single strand of these put together. All right, all three of these I've just gone over, carbohydrate, protein, and nucleic acid, all have monomers and polymers. But you notice here on lipids I have written rebel with the cause, and yeah, it's a throwback to an old James Dean movie. I was trying to be kind of funny. Although lipids have parts, they don't have a true monomer and polymer, because the definition of a monomer and polymer is that the polymer is repeating units of the monomer. And in a lipid, we don't have that. We have two parts that together make the whole. We have glycerol backbone, which looks like this, carbons and hydrogens, and then we have these carbon chains. You can see here, if I'm going to enlarge this just a little bit, we have carbohydrate chains with hydrogens connected to them. So here's one chain, here's the second chain, here's a third chain. The fact that there's three chains actually makes this a triglyceride. There's all different kinds of lipids, but this one in particular is a triglyceride. And we say that these chains are now connected to the glycerol. So when I ask you in class for monomers, you may want to go ahead and say glycerol and fatty acid. But no, those aren't true to the definition of a monomer. And then you put that chain together with your fatty acid tails, and you get the lipid. So the name of the polymer is just lipid. In class, remember, we said that this looks like a comb, and some people had trouble with that analogy because I don't think they knew what a comb looks like. But basically with a comb, you have that back side that you hold on to, and then you have the pieces coming out to the side, and so it kind of looks like a comb. In this case there would only be three, I guess, because that's a triglyceride and it would look kind of like an E. But sometimes there's a whole bunch of fatty acid chains, and so in that case it would look like a comb. All right, so now let's move on to this idea of dehydration and hydrolysis that we've seen on each of these. The word dehydration means exactly what you think of. To dehydrate means to lose water. Well, in these guys, when we lose water, which means we're going to lose an OH and an H, one from one side, one from the other, H2O, OH, and H, when I lose the water, it allows the two monomers to connect. So when water comes out, they can connect and make a whole polysaccharide or polymer. If I put the water back in, that is called hydrolysis. Let's look at this word hydrolysis. Hydro means water, and lysis means to break. So hydrolysis means to break with water. So when I add the water back into the molecule, they no longer have a place to bond here on the side, and so my polymers break apart and go back to the monomer. In this case, for the sugar, for the carbohydrate, it's a monosaccharide. So dehydration means water comes out and I make a polymer. Hydrolysis means that water goes in and I go back to the monomer. And so this is an ongoing cycle. You'll see that that's true for each of these. Dehydration makes the polymer. Hydrolysis makes the monomer. Again, even though this doesn't have the monomer and polymer, dehydration makes the large lipid, and hydrolysis breaks it apart into two different pieces. And then in my nucleic acid, same thing. Dehydration, water out, and I'm able to make my DNA and RNA. If I use water and put it back in, that's hydrolysis, and I go back to my single monomer, which for a nucleic acid is a nucleotide.